Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now today's video we're going to be taking a slightly different approach and I'm going to be discussing both Sazh, his LD, as well as Fran and her LD, even though she's coming out a little bit later, because I'm kind of going in a direction where I'm trying to cover more than one event at once, and by doing this way, it means I'm not having to film a video for Fran over the Christmas period, because, you know, we all need a break at some point. So if you'd like to know more about both Sazh and Fran, their banners, what they get in their kit that's changed, and the events that come with them, then of course stay tuned and keep on watching. Before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitch, where you can find me playing lots of Dissidia, lots of Final Fantasy XIV, and typically lots of other stuff as well. It'd be lovely to see you guys come along. Over on patreon.com/Joesephyr, which is my members only area where people who support the channel get lots of additional benefits. I would give a shout out to one of my patrons at the beginning of every video so that I can give my thanks to each person individually. And today that person is going to be Patch, who has been a long-standing member of my Patreon and a very active member for Would You Pull, being part of my streams, Twitter, all sorts of things. So a massive thank you goes out to you. And they have Zach as their title card, which is always a joy for a lot of people. Zach's a very popular character, so I'm glad to have made that one for you. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators and resources there are for Dissidia Opera Omnia, with special mentions going out to Leo, Bob, and Medeo over on Reddit for their translations, Tom Breedtroop for their fantastic infographics, and the Dissidia Compendium, Dissidia DB, and DissidiaInfo.com for all of their information as well. They're all resources I use on this channel regularly, and I encourage you guys to do the same. So as I said earlier, we're going to start by talking about each of these banners individually and then talking about the characters that are featured on them. As we would in any other Should You Pull video, we're just putting multiple banners in the same video so that it's easy to consolidate the information so that everyone knows for a single place to look if they need to check out any characters that are coming out over the next week. So with the first banner that we're getting, which is going to be on Friday, well Friday for me in the UK anyway, we're going to see the event that's going to contain Sazh LD in there. So obviously Sazh's full kit is there. Palam's going to come back with his full kit. He doesn't get anything new here really, but he's there in case you wanted him. And then Jagran is going to have his BT here as well, for those of you that still want to pick that up. Few of you there may be. And then Lise is there with her EX as well. So if you've not used Sazh before, I mean, honestly, looking through this kit and the rework that he gets and his LD and all of that, it made me remember the 35 CP era when God Emperor Sazh was a thing. And to look at the things that he did then that were so busted, and then looking at now and how different it is, it's quite astonishing. So AIM has been made to just have a double HP dump in it, and it hits harder, so he gets some bravery recovery from it, and then he gives brave battery from it as well, and then attack boost, which gives attack, max bravery, speed, and critical rate up, will also get a bit of a boost in its damage that it deals, and a bit of safety in bravery recovery after he does it. But his LD is where the kind of the meat of his kit is, because before now with his EX he gave Brave Overflow, gave offensive buffs to the party. He also has a little bit of debuffing in his kit thanks to having AIM and his HP plus inflict attack and defense down, but it's only a minor one, so it's kind of just a nice little extra for him as well. So his Spark Shower is a multi-HP dumping attack similar to what we've seen with other gunners like Prompto in the past, and you also get a free skill use the next turn and a new party buff, or a new buff to him, that affects the party called Aggression, which is attack, Brave Overflow, HP damage up, and also Brave gain from Brave damage up. So if you've ever used Golbez and his LD, then you'll know what kind of thing to expect here, because when you deal damage, you gain more bravery than damage you've dealt, and now Sazh introduces this to your whole party as opposed to just himself. And then he gets an HP++ as well, which is a 3-hit Brave HP attack that gives you the attack and defense down, and is quick and is a guaranteed hit, because all of his kit is a guaranteed hit as well, for those characters that maybe, you know, you might miss on odd occasions because of any evasions they put on themselves, but they're very few and far between these days. So basically, Sazh is actually very simple. Like, he doesn't do anything that's huge and like brand spanking new, apart from the fact that he extends a buff that we'd only ordinarily seen on a single character onto other characters in the party. But he does do very well with regards to having just lots of buffs that are offensively sort of nuanced on your party as a whole. Like I said, attack, max brave, crit boost, speed, brave overflow, HP damage, brave gain from HP from bravery damage, like all that good stuff. It's all nice. And the other main thing to bear in mind with Sazh, with his kit, that's probably the most enticing thing about him, and it's a reason that I always liked using him originally when EX era came around, particularly with Alize at the time, is the fact that he has the ability to extend buffs on other characters. Similarly to how Hope does the same sort of thing, there's a few characters that do it, then Sazh can do that, but while also buffing everyone in offensive ways. The other thing to bear in mind with him, though, is that a lot of his buffs are not framed and are therefore easily pushed off. His debuffs are not framed and are also easily pushed off. His HP damage himself isn't that fantastic. Like, he does okay damage with his EX, and obviously his LD can do really strong damage if you've got a large Brave cap up on him against multiple targets, but his damage himself isn't particularly high. But if you want just offensive buffs across the board, then look no further than Sazh. Sazh is also quite nice for his call abilities as well. Like, his attack boost call was one that we used quite a lot back in the day when calls first started becoming a thing and before LD calls were a thing. But the fact that he comes in, does attack boost, which gives you the attack, crit rate, and max bravery up to the party is actually kind of nice. Like, yes, they're all generic buffs, but they're all quite strong ones as well. And having crit rate up 100% on your party is a thing to take note of. But also, Spark Shower, his LD call ability, also makes it so that you get everything you would have gotten from that. So you get the party HP up, HP damage up, you get the attack up, and then for the character that called Sazh, you also get the stolen bravery damage increase based on how much damage you deal as well. So you get that little extra bit as well. And because when he comes in, you get those buffs because of his EX, you get 2 lots of that as well. So while I don't think that you absolutely have to have Sazh for his call ability, it's definitely a nice one to pick up. So now let's move over to next week and see what we get from Fran's banner that's going to be arriving next Tuesday/Wednesday, depending on where you are in the world. So Fran's obviously coming back with her LD, rework, brand new kit. Mog is also returning here with their LD and EX if you haven't already got them. Like me, I don't have them, so it'd be a nice little consolation prize if I went in here. You'd also get Jagran's BT for the last banner here before we get Markina's batch, and then Laguna's there for Chaos Challenge purposes. So Fran was an interesting character in that her whole thing revolved around a stacking debuff that she put on the enemy called Viera's Punishment. So Viera's Punishment would increase in stacks up to a maximum of 5 before now, where every time the enemy was hit, it would level up, you'd get some nice stack downs, and it was all consolidated nicely into one debuff. So you get attack down, magic attack down, defense down, max bravery down, and finally ranged in peril, which meant that your damage would go up quite a lot. Past that, Fran herself actually was fairly unimpressive, but she still does like a decent amount of damage, and the rework that she's got on gives her more skill uses, more HP dumps. It's a fairly generic sort of rework as reworks go, because you could expect to see a lot of HP dumps added into everybody's kit going forward, and Fran is no different for that. So you have Feral Strike, which is single target with splash damage, or you have Whip Kick, which has more HP dumps in it, but is split damage for AoE. So choices to be made. Her LD, however, is very interesting. So Celestial Rain is an AoE Brave HP attack with multiple HP dumps. It gives more stacks of Viera's Punishment onto the target. You get a free skill use on the next turn. And by having the passive equipped, the maximum number of stacks for Viera's Punishment goes from 5 to 10. Now, what you get from this is you get a lot of very nice things added to Viera's Punishment, especially given that it is one debuff. It only takes up one slot on your enemy's lists. It just fits everything in there. So from here you get speed down, brave damage taken up, HP damage taken up, bravery recovery down, and so brave gains down. And then at 10 stacks, everything that you've gotten from there doubles. So the defense goes down to 40% instead of 20. Attack goes down more. Brax Brave goes down more. Magic attack goes down more. Speed goes. You see where I'm going. So to have 40% brave damage up on the enemy, 30% HP damage up on the enemy, and defense down, and everything else on top of it, it's actually a really, really nice thing to have access to, just because it's such a strong debuff. Fran herself isn't all that impressive outside of it, because her potencies are relatively low compared to other damage dealers. She's there primarily for that debuff and that debuff alone. Braver Attack Plus she also gets from here, which is just a way of increasing Viera's Punishment stacks more quickly, but typically you'll find that the enemy taking damage will increase those stacks anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. One thing she does have, however, is her call ability. So Fran's call abilities do inflict the Viera's punishment on them, and if you have Celestial Raid on there, you're going to get a variant of Viera's punishment, which is slightly weaker than the one you would have by having her in your main party, but you still get all of those very, very nice debuffs on. So defense down, you get 10% HP and Brave damage resist, Brave gains go down, all that good stuff comes from the call ability as well. So you get, just by having the passive, the maximum of 10 stacks, but it's all consolidated into one debuff. So while I don't think that Fran is as impressive in your party, she's still usable in it, what you really want her for is that call ability. So now let's take a look at the events that's going to accompany both Sazh and Fran's banners when they are released as well. So both of these are actually very simple to tackle, and part of the reason that I'm starting to move towards putting multiple events into singular videos is because the events themselves are largely very easy from this point onwards for quite some time, and so it doesn't take as much time to actually go over everything. So let's talk about Sazh's one, the Golden City. So we're going to fight Optimus here, which is the big old cannon that we've seen plenty of times before, and it uses conversion to change its mode from red to blue to green, which changes the types of attacks that it does, whether it uses HP attacks more frequently or otherwise. Now the Lufenia Orb in this one is asking you to deal critical Brave damage, and they don't have any way from what I've seen of preventing being broken, so realistically the Lufenia Orb is nothing more than a formality. If you absolutely want to guarantee critical damage, obviously Sazh is an option here. You have access to Barret, you have access to Aranea, Kate Sith, 9. There are characters that can do like critical damage no matter what, so if you wanted to take one of those then you could. However, honestly, your best bet is just to use the biggest damage that you have and just delay the enemies to heaven and back and just punish them with your biggest damage dealing units. There's 2 of them, so you can use the likes of Twins or Jekt or Kuja, or if you wanted to you could use Tifa, you can use Ishtola in a Brave Game team because she has delay in her kit, Garland, Cloud of Darkness, the list goes on. There's no real danger of them resisting anything. They don't resist any type of damage in particular, so just go ham on them and just stop them from getting a turn in the first place, and then you don't have to deal with any of it. So now let's talk about the event that comes along with Fran, which is the second part of the story chapter that we started with Jagrant's release. Now, I have a bit of a soft spot for the boss that we see here because it's Twintania, which is from Final Fantasy V, but in this it's just a variant of Atma weapon, realistically. But the orb on this one asks for 2 different things. So you can inflict a player-inflicted debuff that's level 3 or higher. So if you wanted to use Jagrant for it, then that's going to count for the crystallization. But obviously, what it wants you to use here is Fran's debuff. Or you can use Kurosame, or Jack, or any of the ones that we used in the first part of the story. Or you can then use weakness bravery damage that comes from a ranged attack. So again, asking for Fran here. But you can actually manipulate this by using various different range characters, Imperil, that kind of thing. So as long as you're dealing range damage at all, you can get away with not allowing the enemy to take very many turns, if any at all. So what this guy does, or what the Twintania do, is they have a recast attack that hits really hard. They lower their own defense when they're charging up for it, and they frame their turn so that they can't be delayed, whether it be through break, whether it be through delay itself, or whether it be through eliminating their turns. You can actually use the likes of Vayne or Rebreakers in general if you wanted to, because you can push their turn so far back before that happens that you shouldn't really need to worry about it alongside BTs and stuff like that, as long as you're dealing some weakness range damage. So where do you think we could get some weakness range damage from if we were using a character like Vayne to deal that damage? Well, we recently got Kain, who deals range damage even when it's not his turn. And if you combine that with either an Imperil or Fran's debuff, for example, that can come from a friend unit or from your own call ability, then you really, really don't have to worry about the orb at all. Or you can take the route where you deal like a lot of counter damage through sort of like Ace or just a tank that can do it, or any off-turn damage realistically, and rely on it the same way that we did for Jagrant's abilities in the first part of the story. But what it doesn't do, even though it does prevent rebreaks or delay of any kind, doesn't prevent you from playing around with your own turns. So the combination of using, say, Fran and Kane, whether it be through a call ability or a friend unit, either of the two can be replaced for that. There's nothing stopping you from taking Sid Reigns and Aphmau if you really wanted to, and then you just kind of go off. And again, if you can place the puzzle pieces together, then it shouldn't be a particularly challenging mission for you. So now we come to Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and tell everyone whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why that might be the case. So obviously I've asked all of my patrons to vote and comment on both Saz's banners and Fran's banner here, so a massive thank you for doing so, and I hope that going forward this will all be consolidated in a nice way so that there's plenty of time for people to give their feedback going forward as well. But let's go into some of the numbers, shall we? With Saz's banner, only 4% of people said they were going to spend gems here, 21% said they were going to spend over 100 tickets, 25% said less than 100 tickets, and 50% of people said no thanks. Personally, I'm in the, if I'm capped after Fran or something, I'll go back for Sazh, but I'm not super fussed by him. I think he's good, having that big old HP passive for the party as well as the Golbear's passive. It's nice, but I can definitely live without it. He does more of what he already does. And then with Fran's banner, we have 10% of people saying that they were going to use gems here, 67% of people saying they were going to use more than 100 tickets, 19% saying they were using less than 100 tickets, and 5% saying no thanks altogether. And I am in the majority here as well, where I'll probably use 100 or more tickets because I would really, really like to get that call ability. I know that a lot of players out there don't particularly like pulling for a character if all they're pulling for is a call ability, but for me, I actually find that quite exciting because I know for a fact that call abilities like Faris, Gabranth, Kurasame, etc. have lasted longer in my party than anyone in my main party has, so getting a new call ability is genuinely very exciting for me. So let's go into some of the comments. Kendall McKenzie says, I love Sazh as he's one of the OG support units in the game and actually carried me through early Dissidia, but I'm going to have to go less than 100 tickets here. His buffs and auras are actually pretty good, with HP damage up 30% and giving the party Golbear's LD passive and gaining more bravery than damage dealt, as well as overflow and attack up. And the fact that he extends buffs for his party is also nice. I think the only thing that holds him back is the fact that his buffs from his skill 2 are generic, his debuffs are generic, and he doesn't offer anything in Brave regen or HP regen, but him being a more offensive support character, especially one that enables your party to hit way harder, makes up for it. I think the problem with Sazh is that going forward into C90 era, it's the same thing with Kuja BT and other characters like that as well, is that you don't really need to augment your character's damage as much in C90 because they're gonna be hitting like a bus anyway, so you don't necessarily need to have these big attack auras and things like that. But he does have some interesting interactions, particularly with characters with a large number of HP dumps, thanks to the way that the Golbear's passive works, and you can always combine him, or even use him for his own LD call for those characters in which those niche uses are actually a thing. And I think that he's nice to have, I just think that we can live without it. Doc Shooty says, Fran's LD and improvement to her debuff maker is good or better friend support than most BT effects, so much so that typically one will look for 3-turn Fran friends just to get the full power debuff and then leave. You probably won't use her in your main party unless you really like Fran, but her power is undeniable for getting her, although getting her for challenging with a friend unit or to have almost exclusively as a friend unit, that's a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. Plus with a big power spike and plateau coming in C90, how much you even need her is as much up to personal choice as anything else. The same could be said of a lot of things. This is the thing with C90 era, is that there are no real wrong choices. Fran's damage actually isn't bad. She has a lot of HP dumps in her kit, and so she's well supported. She will churn out the damage, but having that LD debuff is really powerful. Like, even if you use her in your party and then switch her out for a friend unit, like I suggested earlier with Kane for her own event, or anything like that, there's just a lot of applications that I like for Fran, even if she's not in my main party, and that justifies the pull to me. Lude Pasta says, I'm going to be going in with as many tickets as it takes to get Fran LD. That call is actually really useful. The fact that all those debuffs only take up one slot is 10 out of 10, and you also get to use it twice. Plus, I don't have Kurasame LD, so I'm certain that it will be a good enough substitute. That's all I have to say, really, going in for that call. I mean, even if you don't have Kurasame, absolutely, she's fantastic. If you do have Kurasame, you can put your hands together and get a very large amount of damage out of them as well. So if you like playing around with call abilities and trying something that's like combinations of things that work really well. The fact that there's only one slot taken up by Fran is just really, really good. Like, there's no worries. You can take her with Faris, you can take her with anybody, and it will just work. Pale Raider finally says skipping Sazh. His kit doesn't really get any new stuff so much as a boost in what he already has. I've not used him up until now, save for a single Chaos Challenge, and by the time he rolls around again on Irvin's banner, he still won't be a major hitter for my teams. Similar case for Palom, except mine has seen no action whatsoever. I hear that, mine too. No sense in spending resources for a couple of units who admittedly are fine, but I know I can spend the tickets elsewhere to greater effect, which is where Fran comes in, or more precisely, her LD is a call. Both of her calls will apply Javier's punishment debuff, which now goes up to 10 levels. It lowers everything you need it to lower, including range resistance, all while taking up one debuff slot. To me, that makes her the most efficient, potent, and in turn, best call ability currently available in Global. Do you need it to survive? No. Will she surprise you even when you didn't plan on pulling her LD and get it via free pulls anyway? Yes, it will. Well, I tell you what, if I get it in a free pull, I'll be over the moon. But, you know, it would be lovely to get that. I just think that she's worth a pull. And Sazh, I don't think he's not worth a pull, because what he does is good. But it's true that he doesn't have anything particularly noteworthy, as opposed to my offensive stats go up. And because he doesn't boost your defensive stats, you then have to make up for that with somebody else. If you're using characters that are good damage dealers and happen to have decent amounts of, like, HP recovery in their kit, like how Raijin was back in the day, or Desh, then yeah, you could use Sazh with those kinds of characters and he'll make them hit harder. But typically at this point in the game, how many of those characters like that are you actually likely to use? So that's a question that you need to ask yourself before you go in for Sazh. Fran, on the other hand, I feel very, very good about. So now, of course, we ask the big questions of the week. Which banners should you be pulling on, and if any, and why? So I think that if you wanted to, you could skip everything here. I am of the opinion that I think that Fran's call ability, however, is really quite remarkable and is enough for me to warrant pulling on it at all. Sazh's banner is good for people who just want lots of offensive stats. Sazh has done the same thing he's always done, which is boost offensive stats, which once upon a time, like I said earlier, was absolutely game-breaking, and everyone needed to have Sazh because of the abilities that he granted the party. When characters weren't capping bravery every 5 seconds, or in 20 bravery attacks per HP skill, you know, you just don't need those offensive buffs as much as you once did. As long as you've got BT plus effects going off left, right, and centre, all on characters that deal a much larger amount of damage than Sazh does, then you don't realistically need to have Sazh. I think if you want to have Sazh, the fact that he extends buffs is a very, very big thing for him. And if you want to experiment with the new quirk that he has, where he has the ability to deal more or gain more bravery damage than you dealt to the enemies, that's going to open up some experimentation for you. And honestly, like, I kind of wouldn't say no to him for having Alize LD when she comes around, even though you don't really need to have it when that comes around. I just kind of would like to pull the band back together and have Sazh and Alize again. But beyond that, I don't personally feel the need to pull for Sazh. Fran, on the other hand, I think that Viera's punishment is worth the pull on its own. Am I planning on using Fran particularly in my main party? No, I'm not. Am I planning on using her call ability at every given opportunity and therefore using her more than characters I probably use in my main party? Abso-friggin-lutely. But I do understand that some players are put off by that. I only want to use tickets on this banner because I can live without Viera's punishment. I do have plenty of very strong call abilities that I can continue to use for the near future, and therefore I don't have to have it. But do I want it? You're damn right. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you very much for sticking around for this one. I know it's a bit of a jarring moment that I've put multiple events on one video, and that is in part so that I can save myself over Christmas from having to make videos, but I will be making a channel update next week before New Year's for things that I have planned for 2022, as there will be some slight adjustments to the way in which I present my content, and I hope that you guys will all join me for that. But don't worry, there's nothing to be afraid of. I'm certainly not completely dropping my Dissidia content or anything like that. It's just going to be a change in the way in which I present it. So thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And that's going to be all for me today. And I think this is probably going to be the last video I make before Christmas. So I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.